Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. It's Rob. Hope everybody's doing good out there. If you watch the channel on a regular basis or even an irregular basis, you'll notice really quickly that most of my videos are on role-playing games. Whether it's reviews of products or talking about game theory or recapping our weekly games. It's just a lot of role-playing stuff. And, you know, that's great. I love role-playing games. But I did say back in the very beginning when I started doing this back in April that I was going to cover other types of games too. And I have. I've talked about video games. I've talked about board games. I've talked about card games. Just not as much as role-playing games because we tend to do more role-playing here than any of the other stuff. But I also said that I was going to talk about war games, miniature war games. And I haven't done a lot with that at all, and excuse me, because of recent events, me and my son getting back into it and pushing forward with it, I'm going to be doing this series on Flames of War, which is one of my favorite war games. There are a ton of videos out there on, you know, step by step how to play, how to do each phase of the game, and so on and so forth. That's not really what I'm going to do here. I'm basically going to do a series of videos. Like in this one, we're going to talk about how to get into the game and what products you might want to look at getting into the game. And then in future videos, I'm going to look at some of their support release that they've done for the game, be it the books they put out for it, the mission packs, the command cards, the ace campaigns. There's a ton of support from Battlefront Miniatures for Flames of War. And we're going to look at each of those products so that you can see them and decide if it's something you want for you and your game group. Anyway, let me go ahead and get this out of the way. If you have not, please subscribe to the channel, hit the notification button if you like this video, you know, thumbs up, whatever. If you didn't, thumbs down, that's cool too. Whatever floats your boat. But if you did like it and you subscribe and get notifications, you will, you'll get notifications every week when I put up videos. But yeah, this series is basically just going to deal with Flames of War version 4, which is the newest version of it. And I could be wrong, but to the best of my knowledge, research-wise, version 4 or 4th edition Flames of War seems to have started coming out in 2017 with several mid-war books and a rule book. But it really got its big release last year in, I think it was June of 2019. They put out, you know, a big new starter box. It was the launch of 4th edition Late War, which is, I guess, probably the most popular sales-wise for them. Not that there's anything wrong with playing mid-war unless you play Germans, and then your crap's super expensive. I know. But anyway, last year in 2019, they did this big launch. Battlefront did for Late War 4th edition, and it's kind of what got a lot of people into the game because it made it really easy to get into the game. And if you played earlier versions of Flames of War, then you know that version 4 has changed a lot. I never played 1st edition. I played 2nd edition into 3rd edition. Maybe halfway through 3rd edition, I think I quit and got more interested in other things. And it got really overly complicated, in my opinion. This version is not like that. All right, so if you don't know what Flames of War is a 15 millimeter miniature game based on World War II. Now, before the history grognards start hitting me, no, this is probably not the most accurate representation of every battle in World War II, and it is definitely geared towards, not that you have to play tournaments, but it is kind of tournament play because it's this side has 100 points, this side has 100 points. Everything's even across the board, very specific in the way we set up the battlefield, and you play it out. And most battles historically were not like that. Most battles were lopsided one way or the other. Now, that doesn't stop you as a player from doing that yourself. You guys can, because we've done it. We've, okay, well, this side's going to take 150 points. This side's going to take 100 points. We're going to play an ambush mission. You can have a lot of fun with it, and the game scales differently than it used to. It had numbers very similar points-wise to Warhammer or 40K or Warhammer 40K or Age of Sigmar, things like that. Where when you played a game, it was like 1,500 points, 1,750, 2,000 points, whatever. Your standard game of Flames of War now is 100 points, and you can go higher and you can go lower. It does scale. However, if you go below 100, certain armies are going to find themselves at a disadvantage because your stuff is something like Germans, their stuff is very expensive to take, so there's not as much you can field. 100 to me, 100 to 150 is a really good game. You hit the 200 mark and you're looking at a really long afternoon most of the time. But how do you get into it now? What did they do with the big release that changed everything? Well, the first thing they did was they relaunched a bunch of stuff as the late war launch for 4th edition, and the big box set that they put out, which has a lot of bits in it right now, is the Hit the Beach box set. This is a big old box set, and it comes with a pretty good amount of stuff. 2 forces in here. American, you have Company HQ, you have 2 75mm Shermans, you have 3 76mm Shermans, 3 75mm tanks, Sherman tanks, and a support platoon, parachute rifle platoon, 32 figures. The German side gets a Panzer Grenadier HQ, 2 Panzer Grenadier platoons, 58 figures, anti-tank platoon, you get 2 7.5 centimeter AT guns, and 3 Panzer IV tanks. The box set also includes a complete A5 rulebook, and for those of you who don't know, the A5 rulebook is the small travel paperback rulebook, but it has all the rules in it, so you can play with just that. A quick start guide, a V1 flying bomb terrain feature, 16 unit cards, and 20 dice. And then the back of the box also has a nice depiction of the stuff that comes in it, all painted up and whatnot. Now, that's not 2 full armies that you get in there, but it's pretty good, decent, 50, 60 points of army there to play with. And that box set is $50. So if you want to get into it with a friend, $25 gets you into the game. You only get 1 copy of the rule book, but $25 gets you into the game. That's not bad. If you want both forces out of there, you're only spending $50 and you get to keep the rule book. That's still not bad. When you compare, miniature wargaming is an expensive hobby. I mean, there's no 2 ways around that. There are cheap ways to do it, but in general, especially with the bigger games, it can get expensive. So having a $50 price point to get into the game is really, really nice. Now, that being said, it's American and German forces. So if you come into it and you want to, I want to play Russians, not a lot for you in that box other than the rule book, really. Which means you just want to go get the rule book separately. But they have a solution to that. But Germans and Americans are 2 of the biggest sellers. And it's probably why they put them in the box like that, because it's going to sell well. I think altogether we probably bought, just within my game group, that I was involved in, 3 or 4 copies of this between me and other people in the group, in our gaming community. And it'd be like, okay, well, let's split the box. You give me the Germans, because I play Germans. You give me the Germans, I'll give you the Americans. and I already got a rule book, so you can have the rule book, or vice versa. That went back and forth a lot. A lot of people did that, and it basically gave you a really good starting army that you would, then you would probably go and buy other stuff, which I did, and most people do, buy other tanks and things to add to your army, and you end up with a lot more than 100 points, but it gives you variety when you're list building for the army. So you get the dice, you get the A5 rulebook, which is, it's got your missions, it's got all the rules to the game in here. But you also get the core rules 8-page pamphlet, and it's a fold-out pamphlet that is double-sided, and it is full color with diagrams on both sides to explain the basic mechanics of the game for each phase of the game. It's a really quick read, and you can have a lot of fun with just this. Especially if all you got is the Hit the Beach box and you want to learn the game. This is a really good way to get all the basic concepts of the game down. Now there's a lot of plug and play rules that you're going to use later on that are going to not necessarily complicate the game, but I think give it more detail. Also, keep in mind that Flames of War is a game about World War II. It is not a World War II simulation. There are games out there that is what they try to do, is simulate specific battles. Flames of War is not doing that. They do give you some history on the battles and stuff in the boxes and the books and everything, but they're really more about presenting a equally balanced game for you to push tanks and toy soldiers around the table and talk a little smack with your friends and have fun. So, that being said, this is easy core rules that you can pick up on, 15, 20 minutes. You're pushing stuff around the table. Once you have it put together, you're pushing stuff around the table and having fun. And again, for $50, that's a really cheap buy-in. A lot of places, I've seen a lot of game companies that'll come out with a cheap buy-in that you don't get nearly this much stuff. And it'll be a cheap buy-in, and then it either will go out of production, or it won't stay in production very long, or whatever. This has been in production since they released it. It's still available on their website. A lot of your local gaming stores, and I can't speak for yours specifically, you might want to check, but a lot of local gaming stores give discount to military personnel, so you might even get it cheaper than $50 if you're in the military. It's just a really good box set, as long as you want to play Americans or Germans or both. I actually have both forces. I have a big German army, and I have an American, or a small American army, but I'll explain why in another video. I used to have a really huge American army back in version 2, version 3. It was all based around 2nd Armored Division, because my grandfather was a tank commander in 2nd Armored Division, and I kind of did that because of him. But when it came to this new edition coming out, I was like, man, I really want to play the Germans, man. They just got cool tanks. I never got to play the Germans. I always played Americans before. And when all of my friends were getting into it, everybody was picking forces. There weren't that many people picking Germans. So I went for it. And now I have way more than I need, and I'll probably still get more. So what if you want to get into it and you don't want to get the Hit the Beach box, even though it's an amazing deal at $50, because you want to play Russians or you want to play Brits? So you're going to need a rule book, and if you got a bunch of people buying these, hell, we've had extras of these floating around that we just hand out to players, because once you buy this several times, or the army boxes, which I'm fixing to talk about, you get one of these in all of them. So there's tons of these floating, basically free. They're just floating around out there. If you want to just buy the book, they do have a full-size rule book. It's the same rule book, but this is full-size in hardback, and it's I think retail, it's like $25, which is, to me, I think they have a really good price point on their models. I think they have a really good price point on their entry and their books. Most of the books are $20 or $25. You look at, and I'm not bashing on AOS or 40K. I'm just comparing the difference for people who play both games. You look at Warhammer and the prices on their books. Rule book, 50, $60. You might get a free one in a starter. I don't remember if they still do that or not. But, you have to have at least a codex for your army. That's another 40 to $60, something like that. The fact that your codex for your army in here is like $20 is pretty nice. Now, that being said, if you just stick with the base army, that's fine. But once you start getting into playing in the different theaters of war and the different time periods, you're going to be getting more books, more command cards. So don't think for a minute I'm selling it short. You're going to spend money playing this game, just like pretty much any miniature war game. And yes, I know there are free miniature war games out there, but we're talking about high production wargaming. Now the rule book is just like the other one. It's all full color, plenty of examples. The reason that I really got it is because in the small rule book, once you know how to play, this 2-page summary of all the phases is really all you need. You'll very seldom have to look at the rest of the rule book. But in the small one, because of the size of it, that same amount is broken over 4 pages. And I like to be able to just lay my book flat on the table and have all the rules right there, every chart that I need. So yeah, $25 gets you the rule book. So you got the rule book, or I happen to have one of these boxes because my son just picked this one up yesterday. He already has a big Soviet army, but the new Soviet starter stuff came out and he wanted to get it and add it to his collection. So you can get these army boxes. And they have one for all the big four. Brits have one, US has one or two. The Germans have 2 now. They have the standard one, and then they have one for the Waffen SS. But I mean, it comes with a bunch of models. It comes with a rule book, and it's $100. And as opposed to the Hit the Beach box, this is basically like a 100-point army in here, and a rule book for $100. That's not bad. Now, do I think that you will only play with that? Probably not. As you get into it and you learn more about the game and more about history, because that's what I have seen happen is people, you start getting into it and reading the different missions and the history behind them, and then you end up wanting to buy specific tanks or units that were there to add to your force. So your force is going to grow. But if you want to get in, yes, it's $100, but it's $100 with the rule book, and it comes with twice as many models for your army as the Hit the Beach box. Well, along with Hit the Beach, they also released, because they released Fortress Europe, because they knew that a lot of people already had existing armies. And though it is a beautiful book, and I do love the Fortress Europe book, it was fun to play out of this. It basically just gives you kind of a broad overview of the war, late war, and then some pretty basic and generic force lists for all of the major 4 factions. It's not bad priced. I think this was about $25, 20 or $25. And it was what we had in the beginning to play with, this and the unit cards that came out, because cards are a big thing in this edition too. And it's a good starting point. I do like it. But you also they started releasing books for each faction specifically. When all the D-Day stuff came out, the Americans got a D-Day book. The Germans now have 2 D-Day books. But and I'm not going to go over it. And I don't have everything for every army, just the ones I play, mainly the Germans, because that's what I play the most. But the first one the Germans got was just the D-Day German book, Forces in Normandy, which is this one, and I believe it was $20. Nice hardback, full color book. Has a lot of history and fluff in here. Introduces special rules for Fallschirmjäger divisions, which is really cool. Started giving you a little more flavor instead of just the generic stuff that was in the Fortress Europe book. And then I think last month I just picked it up yesterday, or my son actually picked it up for me. Waffen SS D-Day book, and I'm sure they'll release other ones on different aspects of the war. But let's look at what else comes in the Hit the Beach box or the Big Army Starter box. You also get cards. So every one of them, you're going to get a card that goes over your movement orders that you can give each turn. And then you're going to get unit cards that have all of the stats and information for your unit that is in the box. So whether it's the Hit the Beach box or a Big Army box, you're going to get a unit card for every model in there. They also have the cards individually. You can just buy like the German cards, the German D-Day cards, the American cards, so on and so forth. And they give you everything from that book in one card pack, and you end up with a lot of cards. I've got about 5 times this many cards. I got cards everywhere from the stuff I've gotten. And you want to look at your cards, because between the different box sets, sometimes you will get duplicates. Like I might get duplicate Panzer IV tank platoons. But what you want to pay attention to is, depending on what book they come from, they might be Confident Veteran, Fearless Veteran, just depends. And that'll change the price point of how many points you pay to field that unit. Now, for those who scoff at the use of cards, get out of here. Cards are amazing. I loved when I was playing AOS, I loved having cards for my models on the table. I know a lot of people like using apps. I don't. But they do have apps. And I think they have one for this too. I'm not sure. I haven't used it, but you can look on their website. But I love having the point value of the cards, which is what's on the back of them. Tells you how many points to spend for however many of them you're bringing, and any special rules they have. But I love having the cards on the table. It helps me when I'm building a force list, putting my cards out. And yeah, I'm going to take some of this, some of this, some of this, and make sure that I've got everything that I can take and make sure I'm not over my points. And I like having them on the table during the game. To me, I think the first game that I played that ever did this was War Machine, by having unit cards. And I thought it was fantastic then. I love that they did that. And I love that other companies have started doing that with their miniature games by adding the card aspect into it. Because having a single card on the table that has all my stats for that tank platoon or that platoon of infantry, and not having to flip back and forth through the book to find their stats, to me is amazing. I love that. So even if you don't go buy the specific card packs, when you buy the big starter boxes and stuff, you're going to get cards for your units anyway. There are a lot of other products that they have put out with this game. You've got card packs for mission cards. You've got command cards. You've got ace campaign cards. I'm not going to go into all of that today because it's a lot to take in. You've got store events that you can order from them, or gaming group events, whatever you want to do. If you got a bunch of people that want to get together and play, and they'll have private support in the kits that you buy. If you're interested in Flames of War, or if you've played Flames of War previously, I will say that they have streamlined the game quite a bit from previous editions. Some people say they dumbed it down. I don't like to use that term because I don't feel like they dumbed it down so much as they made the game more accessible to new players and younger players. A lot of us old miniature players, we're getting older, and if you want a new generation to come on in and keep the games alive, that fresh blood, if you will, then you're going to have to kind of cater to them a little bit. And I like the streamlining they've done. I thought version 3 was way overcomplicated, and this version is very intuitive. When you're reading the rules, everything you read, you're like, oh, well, that makes sense. That's how I would have done it. Most of the rules make a lot of sense. The command distance thing is a little weird. You don't daisy chain so much as bubble now, but I'm getting off into something I didn't want to do with the video. So I'm just going to stick with, if you are interested in World War II gaming, or you've played Flames of War previously and are interested in 4th edition, I've just presented you with a couple of different ways to get into the game. And comparatively to other miniature games, it's definitely not expensive. I had a lot of fun with my son. We bought the Hit the Beach box. We put the first one we got. We got the Hit the Beach box. We had about 50 points apiece, Germans and Americans. We put everything together, put it on the table, and we played around with it and learned the rules. And man, I'm gonna tell you, even if I had considered that just a board game, it would have been worth the $50 to me for the amount of fun that we got out of it. Now, the fact that we can expand on it and grow our armies and have tons of options, like I think I have 350 points of Germans, and a standard game is 100 points, but that means that I have a lot of options for list building. And each of these books that comes out gives you different lists depending on the troops that were at certain battles or certain time periods of the war. But yeah, if you want to try it out, it's a minimal $50 investment. Gets you 2 factions that you can play, put them together, which doesn't take long because everything's in plastic, now, as opposed to the old resin and metal miniatures. But you can, pop them out, put them together. You can be playing by that evening. If you already know that you want to do a different faction than what's in here, then you can grab the army box. You're still going to get your rule book, and you're going to get a much bigger army than you get in here, but specifically for what you want to play. I have a big German army, and then I now only have a small American force. I think I have about 80 to 100 points of Americans, which I got for specifically Normandy games, because I have the big mat with the beach landing and everything. And if I'm playing and I have somebody who wants to play the Americans but they don't have the Americans, they can play the Americans doing the beach landing. I have a full force for them to use for that. I also wanted to keep at least 50 to 100 points of Americans around, so that if I am going to demo the game and teach other people how to play, I wanted to have both sides, because there's nothing worse than wanting to teach someone the game but all I have is Germans. So we're just going to do Germans on Germans. Can it be done? Sure. But it's not really, first of all, visually appealing or realistic at all to just have those 2 forces fighting, when I could be like, okay, well, I got Brits versus Germans over here, or whatever. You just pick 2 forces, build a small size force of each one, and keep that together as your demo team. If you don't care about demoing games for people, then disregard all of that. But if you do, and I do, because I want to get people into the game, especially games that I'm excited about, that's why I have the small American force, which I will go into more detail on what's in it in another video. But for right now, this is how you get into Flames of War version 4. I hope that it's been informative. I hope that I've given you a look into what products you can get or might want to get into it. And that's all I got for this week. Good gaming. Good luck.